It was a rainy Monday morning when the tall glass towers of the city reflected the gray clouds above, and within one of those towers, the headquarters of the prestigious Sterling Group, executives bustled nervously, clutching files and laptops, preparing for a board meeting that everyone said would determine the fate of hundreds of employees. Inside the CEO's office, the man himself, Alexander Sterling, a self-made millionaire who built his empire from nothing but determination and sleepless nights, sat behind a mahogany desk, his sharp eyes fixed on the digital reports on his screen. He was known as ruthless in business, a perfectionist who tolerated no mistakes, and yet, deep down, those who had worked long enough with him knew there was a part of him that was not entirely steel, though very few had ever seen it. Outside his office, his secretary nervously checked her watch, glancing toward the elevators, because today was the day when applicants for a very special charitable internship were scheduled to arrive, an opportunity that promised scholarships, stipends, and future security for those who succeeded. The program had been Alexander's idea, though he rarely admitted that it was his own childhood of poverty that inspired it. His mother, once bedridden with illness, had struggled to raise him when he was a boy, and perhaps, unknowingly, that memory had fueled his empire. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and instead of the tall, confident teenagers and university students expected for the interview, a little girl no older than 9 stepped out. She wore a faded yellow dress patched at the sides, her shoes scuffed from miles of walking, and in her small hand she clutched a folder so big it looked like it might swallow her. Her hair was tied back into 2 uneven braids, and her eyes, wide, innocent, but determined, scanned the gleaming lobby with awe. The receptionist frowned and bent down to her level, asking gently, "Sweetheart, are you lost? This is the CEO's office." The girl shook her head quickly, her braids swishing. "No, ma'am. I'm here for the meeting. My mom, she was supposed to come, but she's sick. So I came instead." The receptionist blinked, uncertain whether to laugh, pity her, or send her away, but something in the child's voice carried so much sincerity that she picked up the phone and whispered to the secretary upstairs. Moments later, after hushed conversations and raised eyebrows, the little girl found herself walking nervously down the carpeted hallway toward the CEO's office, her tiny shoes squeaking with each step. She paused before the massive oak doors that had intimidated seasoned executives, and when the secretary pushed them open, Alexander looked up, expecting the next applicant, only to see a small figure standing timidly at the threshold. For the first time that morning, his stern face softened into visible surprise. "And who might you be?" he asked, his voice deep, echoing across the high-ceilinged office. The girl clutched her folder tighter and stepped forward bravely. "My name is Lily, sir. My mom was supposed to come for the interview, but she's very sick. She said this was important, so I came instead." The room went still. The secretary bit her lip, ready to usher the child out and apologize, but Alexander raised his hand, signaling her to wait. He leaned back in his leather chair, studying the little girl. There was something hauntingly familiar about the determination in her eyes. "Tell me, Lily," he said slowly, "do you know what this interview is for?" She nodded, though her chin trembled. "It's to get help. To get a chance. My mom said if she got this, we wouldn't have to worry about food for a while. I don't know all the big words, but I know she was so worried, and I don't want her to cry anymore. So I thought, maybe if I come, you'd listen." Her words, so raw and unpolished, struck the man like an arrow to the heart. He remembered nights as a boy when his own mother cried silently, thinking he was asleep. He cleared his throat and gestured for Lily to come closer. "Show me what's in your folder," he said. With trembling fingers, Lily placed the worn folder on his desk. Inside were hand-drawn charts made with crayons, a few neat notes in a child's handwriting, and at the very back, a letter in shaky cursive inked on lined paper. Alexander unfolded it carefully. It was from Lily's mother, apologizing for not being able to attend, explaining her illness, and humbly asking for a chance. The letter ended with a line that made Alexander pause, if I can't build a future, maybe my daughter can. Please don't shut the door on her." He exhaled slowly, the weight of the words pressing against memories he thought he had buried. He looked at Lily again. "Did you make these charts yourself?" She nodded proudly, though her cheeks flushed. "I didn't know how to use the computer like Mom, but she told me about the things she wanted to say, so I drew them. This one shows how much money we spend every week, and this one shows how we could save if we get help. I know it's not perfect, but I tried." Alexander found himself smiling despite the lump in his throat. The little girl's effort reminded him of the nights he had drawn imaginary business plans on scraps of paper when he was a boy. He had presented them to his sick mother, promising that one day, he'd make enough to buy her medicine. And here, decades later, a child was standing in front of him with the same innocent determination. The board meeting could wait, he decided. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Lily," he said gently, "do you know who I am?" She tilted her head. "You're Mr. Sterling. The boss of this whole place. The man in the big suit." He chuckled softly at her honesty. "Yes, something like that. And do you know how many people want what you're asking for? Thousands. Some are older, more experienced, more prepared." Lily's eyes dimmed for a moment, but then she straightened her small shoulders. "I know I'm little. But my mom says sometimes, being brave is more important than being big. I thought, if I showed you that we're willing to try, maybe you'd see us. Maybe you'd help." The room seemed to grow quieter, as if the very air held its breath. Alexander stared at her, and in that moment, he didn't see just a child, he saw himself, decades younger, standing in the shadow of hopelessness yet refusing to bow down. He made a decision, one that even he didn't fully understand yet. "Sit here," he said, pointing to a chair across from him. "I'll hear your proposal." The secretary's mouth fell open, but she didn't dare interrupt. And so, for the next hour, in the grand office high above the city, a little girl with crayon charts and shaky words spoke to a millionaire CEO, not with polished jargon or business terms, but with sincerity, honesty, and a courage that defied her years. Alexander asked her questions gently, sometimes rephrasing them so she could answer, and each time she responded with surprising clarity. She spoke about her mother's dreams, about wanting to go to school without worrying about hunger, about wishing she could buy her mom medicine without waiting for handouts. And with each word, Alexander felt the walls he had built around his heart slowly crumble. When she finished, she looked at him anxiously, her small hands gripping the chair. "Did I do okay, sir?" she whispered. He nodded slowly, his voice thick with unspoken emotion. "You did more than okay, Lily. You reminded me why I started all this in the first place." He stood, walked around the desk, and crouched to her level, something he hadn't done for anyone in years. "Your mother must be very proud of you." Lily's eyes welled with tears. "I just want her to get better. I want her to smile again." Without another word, Alexander gently closed the folder, placed his hand over it, and looked at the secretary. "Cancel the next appointment. And call the hospital. I want the best doctors sent to this child's home immediately." The secretary gasped, nodding quickly. Lily blinked in shock. "Does that mean, you'll help us?" He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that few in the corporate world had ever seen. "Yes, Lily. I'll help you. Not because of charts or letters, but because you had the courage to walk into this office when the world told you you were too small. That's the kind of bravery this world needs." Lily leapt forward and hugged him tightly, and though he froze at first, unaccustomed to such gestures, he slowly wrapped his arms around her. And in that quiet office, for the first time in years, Alexander Sterling felt the warmth of something money could never buy, hope. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the skyline, painting the tall glass towers gold, but inside a modest apartment on the poorer side of town, the real light came not from the sky but from the small figure sitting by her mother's bed, holding her hand. Lily had barely slept, her eyes were heavy, but her heart was racing because everything had changed overnight. True to his word, Alexander Sterling had sent doctors, real doctors in crisp white coats, carrying medicine and machines that hummed softly, filling the room with a hope that the family hadn't dared to dream about in months. Her mother, pale but smiling faintly, kept whispering that she didn't understand why someone so important would care about them, and Lily just held her hand tighter, whispering back, "Because I asked him, Mama." And he listened. Meanwhile, across the city in his towering office, Alexander sat in his leather chair staring at the reports piling on his desk, but for the first time in years, they didn't matter to him as much as the face of the little girl who had walked into his office with crayon charts and courage. He had faced countless negotiations, survived ruthless rivals, and built an empire brick by brick, yet nothing had unsettled him like that small voice saying, "I just want her to smile again." The memory tugged at him relentlessly. His assistant entered with the usual schedule, board meetings, investor calls, contract signings, but Alexander pushed it aside. "Reschedule everything afternoon," he ordered. "I have somewhere to be." The assistant hesitated, stunned. Alexander never broke routine, but one look at his steely eyes convinced him not to question further. Later that day, his sleek black car pulled up outside the small apartment building where Lily lived, and for the first time in decades, Alexander stepped into a neighborhood that reminded him of where he had come from. The cracked sidewalks, the peeling paint, the smell of bread from the corner shop, all of it carried him back to the boy he once was, clutching his sick mother's hand and promising to make life better. When Lily opened the door and saw him standing there, her jaw dropped. "Mr. Sterling. You came," she exclaimed, tugging at his sleeve as if he were some kind of superhero. Her mother, weak but polite, tried to sit up, embarrassed that someone so powerful was seeing their humble home. "Sir, you didn't have to," she began, but Alexander raised a hand gently. "Please, call me Alexander." "And yes, I did have to. Because I remember what it's like to sit where you are now, to wonder if tomorrow will bring medicine or misery. And I promised myself, when I was a boy, that if I ever had the power to change that for someone, I would." Her eyes widened, tears brimming, because she realized in that moment that this man, who seemed untouchable to the world, carried scars much like her own. He pulled out a folder of his own, not with crayon charts, but with documents, an offer to cover her medical treatment entirely, a scholarship fund in Lily's name, and a promise of employment when her health allowed it. "This isn't charity," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. "This is an investment, in you, in your daughter, in a future where courage like hers doesn't go unnoticed." Lily squealed with joy, hugging him again, and for the second time, Alexander found himself surprised by the warmth of her tiny arms around his waist. Days turned into weeks, and the transformation was remarkable. With proper treatment, Lily's mother regained her strength, her laughter slowly returning, filling the apartment with a music that had been missing for too long. Lily returned to school with a newfound sparkle, proudly telling her classmates that the CEO himself had listened to her charts. But it wasn't just their lives that changed, Alexander found himself changing too. He began visiting more often, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. He listened to Lily's wild stories, her imaginative plans to open a bakery one day, her insistence that rich people forget how good cookies taste if they don't bake them themselves. For the first time, his evenings were not consumed by figures on a screen but by laughter, crayons, and the sound of a child reminding him of the simple joys of life. His board of directors noticed the shift. He smiled more in meetings, he spoke with a patience and warmth that had long been absent, and when he introduced new company policies focused on employee welfare and community outreach, they realized their once ruthless leader was becoming something more, a man driven not just by profit, but by purpose. One particular evening, as he walked through the bustling streets after visiting Lily, he realized how profoundly she had reawakened something in him. He had spent years believing that money was the only shield against pain, the only path to dignity, yet here was a child who had shown him that courage, kindness, and honesty were worth more than empires. The next morning, he stood before his entire company in the grand auditorium, thousands of employees staring in curiosity as he announced a new initiative, a foundation in Lily's name, dedicated to providing education, healthcare, and opportunities for children from struggling families. As he spoke about Lily's bravery, how she had walked into his office with nothing but hope, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the hardest executives found themselves clapping until their hands ached. But the story didn't end there. One Saturday, Lily invited Alexander to her school for Career Day, and when he walked into the small classroom filled with giggling children, he was overwhelmed by their innocent questions. "Are you really rich?" one boy asked bluntly. "Do you fly in airplanes every day?" another chimed in. But Lily raised her hand proudly and said, "This is my friend Mr. Sterling. He's rich, but that's not why he's special. He's special because he listens." The teacher wiped her eyes discreetly as the children clapped, and Alexander realized in that instant that his legacy would not be measured by towers of glass and steel, but by the hearts he touched. Later that evening, sitting in his office high above the glittering city, he stared out at the skyline and whispered to himself, "Maybe I needed her more than she needed me." He thought of his late mother, of the promises he had made as a boy, and he knew that somewhere, somehow, she was smiling. Lily's courage had given him a chance to keep that promise, to heal not just others but himself. And as months passed, the bond between Alexander and Lily's family grew stronger, transforming from gratitude into genuine friendship, from chance encounter into chosen family. It was proof that sometimes, the smallest voices carry the loudest echoes, and the bravest steps are taken by the tiniest feet. And to everyone hearing this story now, remember this: you never know how powerful a single act of courage can be. It can change a life, it can soften a heart of steel, it can reshape the future. If Lily's story touched you, if her bravery and Alexander's transformation inspired you, then let this be your reminder that kindness still matters in this world. And before you go, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it. Because by doing so, you're not just supporting stories like this, you're helping spread hope, reminding others that miracles often begin with the simplest words, "Mom's sick, so I came instead."